There are 7 hobbies I believe can help keep you young after 60, but not young in the way most people think. I don't mean looking 20 years younger in the mirror or trying to keep up with people half your age. I'm talking about staying young where it really matters. In your mind, in your heart, and in the way you wake up each morning still feeling that there is something worth looking forward to. I'm an old man now, and I've lived long enough to learn that growing older happens whether we like it or not. But becoming old inside is something different. I've watched people retire and slowly lose their curiosity, their friends, their confidence, and even their reason to get out of bed. And I've watched other people reach their 70s, 80s, and even 90s, and somehow still have that little spark in their eyes. They laugh easily, they talk to strangers, they learn things, they make things. They have stories to tell. They still get excited about a beautiful morning. Over the years, I've come to believe that the difference often has less to do with age and more to do with what we continue doing with our lives. So today, I'd like to share 7 simple hobbies that have helped me understand this. Some I've practiced myself, some I've watched change the lives of people I know, and a few are things I wish I had started much earlier. And I want to begin with something so ordinary that you might wonder why I'm even calling it a hobby. But trust me, there's more to it than you might think. The first hobby is walking. Now, I'm not talking about power walking with a stopwatch, a fitness tracker screaming at you, or trying to reach some magical number of steps every day. I'm talking about simply getting outside and putting one foot in front of the other. When I was younger, I never appreciated walking the way I do now. I was always in a hurry. If I had somewhere to go, I drove. If I had something to think about, I worried about it while sitting at a desk. These days, I've discovered that some of my clearest thoughts come when I'm walking slowly through my neighborhood. There is something about moving your body while giving your mind a little quiet that changes your whole mood. You notice things you normally miss. A tree you've passed 100 times suddenly has flowers on it. A neighbor you've never spoken to waves at you. You hear birds, children playing, a dog barking behind a fence. One gentleman I knew, named George, retired in his mid-60s, and for months he spent nearly every day sitting in front of the television. Morning news, afternoon news, evening news, then more television before bed. His wife finally looked at him one morning and said, "George, you're becoming part of that couch." He laughed, but the comment stayed with him. The next morning he went outside for 15 minutes. That's all he could manage at first, but those 15 minutes slowly became 20, then 30. Before long he knew half the people on his street. He knew which dog belonged to which house, which neighbor was growing tomatoes, and which child was learning to ride a bicycle. He told me one day, "I started walking because I thought I needed exercise. I didn't realize I was going to collect friends." I thought that was wonderful. So if you walk, don't make it a punishment. Don't worry about speed. Look around. Breathe. Give your mind some room. Sometimes a short walk can carry away a burden that seemed much heavier when you were sitting still. And that leads beautifully into the second hobby, making new friends. I know that may sound strange. We usually don't think of friendship as a hobby, but after retirement, it can become one of the most important things we deliberately make time for. When you're young, friendships seem to happen automatically. You meet people at school, at work, through your children, through neighbors, through all kinds of daily activities. Then retirement comes, and suddenly many of those natural opportunities disappear. You wake up one morning and realize you haven't spoken to anyone outside your family for several days. That can happen very quietly. I've experienced periods like that myself, and I've learned that loneliness doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it simply makes your world a little smaller every week. That's why I encourage older people to keep putting themselves where other people are. Go to a local cafe, join a walking group, attend a community gathering, take a class, play cards, visit a place of worship if that is meaningful to you, volunteer. Talk to the person standing beside you instead of staring at your phone. You don't need 20 new friends. Sometimes one good conversation is enough to brighten an entire day. I knew a woman named Martha who was in her 70s, and every Wednesday she met several friends at the same little cafe. They weren't discussing politics or solving the world's problems. Sometimes they spent 20 minutes arguing about which pie was best. Sometimes they forgot the name of an actor and laughed about it. Sometimes they simply complained about the weather. But she never missed those Wednesdays. She once told me, "Those afternoons keep me going." I understood exactly what she meant. We don't always need extraordinary experiences. We need people to laugh with, people who know our history, people who notice when we aren't ourselves. And if you've been thinking about an old friend lately, don't keep saying, "I should call them someday." Pick up the phone. You may discover that they have been waiting for your call too. Now, once you begin walking, meeting people, and becoming more engaged with the world around you, something else starts to happen. You may find yourself wanting to do more than simply watch life pass by. You may want to create something of your own. And that's why the third hobby is making something with your hands. I have always believed there is a special satisfaction in looking at something and being able to say, "I made that." It doesn't have to be beautiful. It doesn't have to be valuable. It doesn't even have to work perfectly. It simply has to come from you. Maybe you enjoy gardening. Maybe you've always wanted to build a small piece of furniture. Maybe you like cooking, painting, knitting, woodworking, pottery, repairing old things, or making little decorations for your home. I once watched a retired office worker named Robert discover this almost by accident. He had spent decades sitting behind a desk, surrounded by paperwork and meetings. After retirement, he felt strangely empty because his days had suddenly lost their structure. One afternoon, his grandson asked him if they could build a birdhouse together. Robert had never built one before, but he agreed. Their first attempt was crooked. The roof leaned to one side, the paint got everywhere, and the little entrance looked as if a squirrel had designed it. But they laughed so much that neither of them cared. The following weekend, they built another one, then another. Eventually, Robert started making them on his own. His neighbours began asking if he could make one for their yards. But what mattered most wasn't the birdhouses. Years later, Robert told me, "I thought I was building birdhouses, but I was really building memories with my grandson." That sentence stayed with me. At our age, we sometimes think we need to accomplish something important before our time is over. But perhaps some of the most important things are much smaller. A flower you planted, a meal you cooked for someone you love, a chair you repaired, a painting that isn't perfect but makes you smile every time you see it. These things give your hands something to do, but they also give your heart a reason to participate in life. And there is one more thing I've noticed as I've grown older. When you start making things, you often rediscover something else you may have forgotten. The simple pleasure of learning. That's where the fourth hobby comes in, learning something new. For a long time, I believed learning belonged to the young. School was for children, training was for workers, and retirement was supposed to be the time when you finally stopped having to learn anything. What a foolish idea that turned out to be. The older I became, the more I realized that curiosity is one of the best ways to keep life from becoming dull. You don't need to earn a degree. You don't need to become an expert. Learn how to use something on your phone that has always confused you. Learn a few words of another language. Pick up a guitar. Try photography. Learn how to bake bread. Paint. Read about a subject you've always wondered about. I knew a woman in her 70s who decided she wanted to learn watercolor painting. Her first attempts were, well, let's just say nobody would have accused her of being a famous artist. But she kept going. 6 months later, she had paintings hanging all over her house. More importantly, she had confidence she didn't have before. Her grandchildren became interested in what she was doing, and eventually she began teaching them. That is what learning can give us after retirement. It doesn't just put new information into your head, It reminds you that you are still capable of becoming someone slightly different from the person you were yesterday. And I think that is one of the most beautiful things about getting older. We don't have to stop becoming. We can still surprise ourselves. So far, we've talked about moving your body, opening your life to new people, creating things with your hands, and keeping your mind curious. But there are still 3 more hobbies that I believe can bring an entirely different kind of richness to these later years. And as I've discovered, some of the most meaningful things we can do after retirement have very little to do with keeping busy, and everything to do with giving our lives a reason to feel alive. That's where we'll continue from here. Now, if you've been listening to me this far, you may have noticed something about these hobbies. None of them require you to become a completely different person. You don't need to spend a fortune, travel around the world, or fill every hour of your day with activities. They are simple things, but simple things can have a powerful effect when you give them a place in your life. And as I've gotten older, I've learned that the best years aren't necessarily the busiest years. They're the years when you still have something that makes you curious, something that makes you laugh, something that makes you feel useful, and someone you'd like to share it with. That's why the 5th hobby is volunteering and helping other people. Now, I know what some of you may be thinking. I've worked my whole life. I'm finally retired. You're not going to tell me I need another job, are you? No, my friend. That's not what I mean at all. Volunteering doesn't have to feel like work. It can be as simple as helping a neighbor, reading with a child, visiting someone who doesn't get many visitors, teaching a skill you've spent decades learning, helping at a community center, caring for animals, or lending your time to a cause that means something to you. I've discovered that one of the hardest things about retirement isn't having too much free time. It's sometimes waking up and wondering whether anybody still needs you. Work gives many people a sense of structure and usefulness, and when that disappears, a strange emptiness can take its place. But usefulness doesn't retire when your job does. I once knew a retired mechanic named Sam who struggled with this very thing. He kept telling people, "I don't know what my purpose is anymore." Then his local community center asked if he would teach a group of teenagers a few basic car repair skills. He almost refused. He thought, "I've spent enough years working on cars." But he decided to try one Saturday. Then he went back the following Saturday. Before long, those teenagers were learning how to change a tire, check an engine, and handle small problems without being afraid. But something else was happening. Sam was laughing again. He started looking forward to Saturday mornings. One of the boys began calling him Coach, and Sam told me that hearing that word made him feel useful again. That's what I want you to remember. You may be retired from your profession, but you are not retired from being valuable. There is knowledge inside you that took decades to build. There are lessons you learned the hard way that could save somebody else years of trouble. There are stories you could tell, skills you could teach, and kindness you could offer. You don't have to change the whole world. Sometimes helping one person is enough to give an entire day meaning. And strangely enough, when you start giving your time to others, you often discover that you receive something back that money can't buy. You feel connected. You feel needed. You feel awake. And that brings me to the 6th hobby, becoming the storyteller of your family. Now, I know some of you are probably already doing this. You have a story for everything. Somebody asks what time dinner is, and somehow you're telling them about a restaurant you visited in 1968. But please don't apologize for that. Your stories may be more important than you realize. I've reached an age where I understand something I didn't understand when I was young. Photographs can show people what happened, but stories can tell them what it felt like. Every family has memories that could disappear if nobody tells them. How your parents met, where your grandparents lived, what your first job was like, how you met your spouse, the trouble you got into as a teenager, the hardest period of your life and how you got through it, the funniest mistake you ever made, the family recipe that has been passed down for generations. These aren't useless old memories. They are pieces of your family's identity. I once knew a grandfather who decided to write down one memory every Sunday. He didn't write a book. He didn't try to become an author. He simply wrote one memory at a time. Sometimes it was only a page. Sometimes it was a few paragraphs. He wrote about his first day at work, the time he got lost driving somewhere, the day he met his wife, and the biggest fish he ever caught, which, according to his grandchildren, somehow became larger every time he told the story. His grandchildren loved it. One of them eventually told him, "Grandpa, I hope you never stop telling us these stories." That sentence meant more to him than any award could have. And you don't even have to write. If writing feels tiring, record your voice. Sit down with your phone and talk for 5 minutes. Tell your grandchildren where you grew up. Tell them what your first home looked like. Tell them what your parents taught you. Tell them about the mistakes you made and what you learned from them. Tell them about the people you loved and the people who helped you when you needed it. One day, someone may listen to that recording after you're gone, and suddenly your voice will be in the room with them again. That's a gift. So don't assume your life wasn't interesting enough. You don't need to have been famous. You just need to have lived. And if you've lived for 60, 70, 80, or 90 years, believe me, you have more stories than you think. But there is still one final hobby I want to talk about, and this one may be the easiest of all. It doesn't require money, equipment, a membership, or even a special skill. In fact, you've probably known how to do it since you were a child. The seventh hobby is simply keeping your sense of play. Somewhere along the road from childhood to adulthood, many of us became terribly serious. We learned to worry about bills, schedules, responsibilities, appearances, and what other people might think. We became so concerned with being productive that we sometimes forgot how to have fun. Children don't have that problem. A child can spend an hour chasing a ball, drawing something ridiculous, dancing to a song, or laughing at the same joke 20 times. They don't ask whether the activity is productive. They just enjoy it. I think older adults deserve permission to do the same thing again. If you like puzzles, do puzzles. If you enjoy playing cards, find people to play with. If you like bowling, go bowling. If you enjoy fishing, go fishing. Play with your grandchildren. Build something silly. Put on music and dance in your living room, even if your knees don't remember the steps anymore. And please don't worry too much about looking foolish. At our age, we've earned the right to be a little foolish now and then. I once knew a couple in their late 70s who had a wonderful Friday night tradition. After dinner, they would turn on the old songs they loved when they were young and dance in their living room. They weren't professional dancers. Sometimes they remembered the steps, sometimes they didn't. Sometimes one of them went left while the other went right. But they laughed and kept dancing. Their grandson once walked in and asked, "What are you two doing?" The husband smiled and said, "We're practicing for when we're 90. I loved that answer. That is the attitude I hope more of us carry into old age. You don't have to act young. You don't have to dress young, talk young, or pretend that your body is 25. You simply have to keep allowing yourself to enjoy being alive. There is a big difference. Growing older is not the problem. Losing your ability to enjoy the day in front of you is what makes life feel old. And when I look back at all 7 of these hobbies, walking, making new friends, creating things with your hands, learning something new, volunteering, telling your family's stories, and keeping your sense of play, I notice that they all have something in common. They keep you connected. Connected to your body when you walk, connected to other people when you make friends, connected to your creativity when you build or make something, connected to your curiosity when you learn, connected to your community when you volunteer, connected to your family when you tell your stories, and connected to the child still living somewhere inside you when you play. Maybe that's the real secret to staying young after 60. It isn't about fighting your age. It isn't about pretending that time hasn't passed. I have wrinkles, my hair has changed, My body doesn't move the way it once did. I've said goodbye to people I thought would always be here. I've watched the world change in ways I never expected. That's simply part of being fortunate enough to live a long life. But I've also learned that every morning still gives us a choice. We can wake up and decide that our most interesting days are behind us, or we can ask ourselves, what can I discover today? Maybe today you call an old friend. Maybe you walk around the block. Maybe you plant something. Maybe you finally learn how to use that phone feature you've been avoiding for 3 years. Maybe you help somebody. Maybe you tell your grandchildren a story they've never heard. Maybe you put on an old song and dance badly in the kitchen. There is no perfect formula. You don't need to do all 7. Start with 1. Let that one lead you toward another. I've also learned something else with age. We spend so much of our lives trying to reach the next stage. When we're young, we want to grow up. Then we want a career, then a house, then retirement. And sometimes, when retirement finally arrives, we look around and wonder what we're supposed to be waiting for now. But perhaps we're not supposed to wait for anything. Perhaps this is the chapter where we finally live without constantly rushing toward the next destination. You can wake up slowly. You can drink your coffee. You can take your walk. You can call someone you love. You can learn something simply because you're curious. You can make something with your hands. You can help somebody who needs you. You can laugh at yourself. You can tell a story for the 10th time because your grandchildren secretly love hearing it. These things may look small from the outside, but a long life is made of small moments. Years from now, we rarely remember the ordinary Tuesday because we accomplished more work than usual. We remember the afternoon our grandson laughed so hard he couldn't breathe. We remember the friend who called when we were lonely. We remember the smell of bread in the kitchen. We remember the walk when the trees were full of flowers. We remember the song our spouse loved. We remember the day somebody said, "Thank you. I really needed your help." That's life. Not the big plans we spend so much time worrying about, but the little moments that make us glad we were here to experience them. So if you're over 60, I want you to hear this from an old man who has made plenty of mistakes and learned most of his lessons the slow way. Don't decide that your life is supposed to become smaller just because you are getting older. You may need to change your pace. You may need to change your priorities. You may need to accept that your body has different limits now. But you don't have to stop being curious. You don't have to stop making friends. You don't have to stop laughing. You don't have to stop learning. You don't have to stop helping people. And you certainly don't have to stop having fun. Growing older is something that happens to all of us. Growing wiser, kinder, more grateful, and more alive, that part is still in our hands. And perhaps staying young was never really about your birthday at all. Perhaps it has always been about the way you greet the morning. Before I go, I'd really love to hear from you. Which of these 7 hobbies is already part of your life? And which one made you think, you know what, maybe I'll give that a try? Tell me in the comments. I enjoy reading what people from different generations and different parts of the world have learned from their own lives. Your story might be exactly what another older person needs to hear today. And if this conversation gave you a little encouragement, share it with someone you care about, especially someone who may be feeling that retirement has left them without a purpose. Sometimes one simple reminder can change the way a person looks at the years ahead. Thank you for spending this time with me. Truly. At my age, I don't take conversations like this for granted. Every person who listens, every person who shares a story, every person who takes a moment to think about how they want to live the next chapter of their life, it all means something to me. So take care of yourself. Get outside when you can. Keep your mind curious. Keep good people close. Help someone when you have the chance. Tell your stories while you're still here to tell them. And whatever happens, don't let the little kid inside you disappear completely. Growing older is inevitable, my friend, but giving up on joy is not. Thank you for being here with me today. Take care, stay curious, keep laughing, and I'll see you again soon. Until then, Enjoy the life that's still right in front of you.